Welcome to another deep dive edition of the Chicks on the Right podcast. Very excited that we have a special guest with us today, and it's Jennifer Sey. If you haven't heard that name before, Jennifer Sey was brand president for Levi's before they went all woke and crazy and decided that she wasn't allowed to speak her mind. And she is now no longer with Levi's. She's also the author of Levi's Unbuttoned and Chalked Up. And she has a Substack that you can follow called Say Everything. Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you both for having me. It's nice to meet you.
Great to have you.
We're excited to hear the story. And for people who may have not heard the story, we invite you to tell it from beginning to end.
Okay, I'll tell it as concisely as I can. I was a longtime Levi's employee. I think that's an important point. I started there in 1999 as an entry-level marketing assistant, climbed my way all the way up the ladder, which as a woman in corporate America in the 90s and 2010s was not particularly easy. I'm happy to say it's gotten a little bit better, which is good news. But I was a longtime employee. I was well liked. I was a very committed coach. I really wanted to help my team and team members build meaningful careers. And so, that's all just to say, like, I had a lot of friends, I had a lot of support in the company. And I worked my way up to chief marketing officer in 2013. And I was in that role for 8 years, which is a really long time for a CMO. The average tenure is like 18 months before you get fired.
Really? Why?
Because most of them are terrible at their jobs. And it's a tough job. It's very public facing. The demands are high. And it's a high pressure position. And because I think it's very public facing, it's open to more scrutiny. You're often the spokesperson or one of them for the company, which I was. And certainly when I stepped in, it was a challenging role. I mean, the company had been in decline for over 10 years. It was on the verge of bankruptcy, this beloved, storied brand, an icon, an American icon. We were barely making it, and that was my challenge, was to turn it around, to make the brand cool again. It had been the height of cool in the 80s and 90s, and it fell out of favor for a host of reasons, many of which were our own doing. And I took that challenge on enthusiastically and started with the fundamentals to get us back on track, and then kind of amplified from there. And we just went on an unprecedented growth run, increased profitability, all of it. Like, I did a good job. That's the point.
Well, you did such a good job that you were one of the people that they had considered for CEO.
Yeah, that's right. I was. It took a while because, of course, as a woman, you have to sort of not just prove yourself, but then prove yourself again like 10 times over. I helped transform the business, and we had a successful IPO in 2019. And I was there on the podium, at the New York Stock Exchange, which was really cool. And our women's business was transformed. I mean, like, it was great. And I was beloved, and was sort of considered in a new class of leader for having done so. I got awards outside. I was one of the best CMOs in the world for 2 years in a row, named by Forbes magazine. But then here's the fun part. In 2020, when I was still the CMO, I was very outspoken from the very beginning, like March 2020, about public school closures and all the restrictions being placed on children, in particular due to COVID. We had closed playgrounds in San Francisco, where I used to live, for close to 10 months. Playgrounds. So I spoke out about that and school closures, and to some extent the masking of toddlers. I was pretty careful because I didn't want to sort of speak out against things that we endorsed as a company. We had a masking rule, for instance. We had a vax mandate. I was opposed to all those things, but I was careful, and I felt like if I focused my advocacy on children, I might be able to build some bridges and make a difference. That was not the case. About 6 months into my outspokenness, I got my first talking to at the company telling me I needed to stop and watch what I said. And at this point, I should note, it was 6 months in, September 2020, all of my peers who sent their kids to private school had sent their kids back to in-person school because privates opened and public stayed closed. My kids were in public school. But it wasn't just about my kids. It was about all the kids in public school in San Francisco, 50,000, mostly low-income children. And, this is on the heels of, companies in the summer of 2020 after the murder of George Floyd saying, we're going to do everything we can to fight for equality. And yet this really fundamental thing, which is probably one of the most significant, equal access to education, is a fight for equality of opportunity. Yeah. And yet I was told what I was saying was unacceptable, and even as they sent their own children to school.
When you say when you say that they like gave you a talking to, like, how does that work? Do they call you, like, because obviously you weren't going to work then, you were out at home, so you're like doing a Zoom meeting with somebody, and they're like, listen, you can't say that, you can't do.
It's
this
a good
kind of
question.
Stuff. Like, how does that even work? Yeah,
I will tell you. I got a call. I kept waiting, right? And I thought, well, if I'm not getting a call, maybe they don't notice. I didn't have much of a following, and I was very optimistic, naively so. Like, no one said anything yet. I was outspoken on social media, and then eventually, on the local news a lot. I attended school board meetings, wrote op-eds. Like, I was not just tweeting, I was really trying to kind of harness a coalition of parents to say, our kids are not okay. We need to come up with a different solution. Right. But in September of 2020, I got a call from a peer. She was the head of corporate communications. So, the communication for the company, Levi Strauss and Company, whereas I managed all the communication for the brand, Levi's. She saw herself, and you could argue her role was to manage the reputation of the company. Mm-hmm. Things like earnings calls, like she managed that, and I knew as soon as the phone rang, because, in a virtual world, you schedule meetings. You don't just call people. You don't pop by for a talk. And I saw it on my phone, and I was like, oh shit, this is the call. I was like, this is it. Should I not answer? Should I throw my phone across the room? Should I answer and hold my ground? And I answered, and I was very nervous. Now, we're peers, but my rank is slightly higher. So I also was like, I can assert some authority here. It's not my way, but I can. Yeah. And she said, people are noticing your Twitter. And I said, oh, yeah. Like, I was going to make her say it. You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't going to, I was like, you need to say this.
Yeah.
You need to say this thing that is so ridiculous, and hear how ridiculous it is.
Yeah.
So I wouldn't give like an inch. I was like, oh, okay. And, well, the things that you're saying, you have to remember when you speak on behalf of the company. And I said, but I don't. I'm a mom of 4 children, public school kids. I've been a child advocate for a long time. I had been very vocal in my advocacy for children in sports, which is another story. We don't have to talk about that, but was very much part of exposing abuse in gymnastics, and fighting for change there. And I said, this is an extension of my advocacy for children, and I'm still a citizen. I get to say these things. And she was not comfortable with that, but I didn't back down. And she said, well, you speak on behalf of the company. You have to keep that in mind. I said, I will keep that in mind. And I said, are you telling me I have to stop? And she said, no, I can't do that. And I didn't know if she meant because she wasn't my boss, or because you can't actually tell a private citizen that they don't have the freedom to say what they think. But I accepted the answer, and I said, okay, then I won't. Thank you. And that was kind of the end of the call. And, it was very awkward, and neither of us really wanted to continue. But I was like, okay, I held my ground. I think I cried probably when I got off. Yeah. But then the calls kept coming every 2 weeks, not just from her, but from whoever, some poor soul who was assigned the responsibility of talking to me and telling me to stop at something I was not going to stop doing. It was the head of HR. It was never my boss, the CEO. Wow. Because he's afraid of having any sort of confrontational discussion. And I also think they sort of, in their heart of hearts, knew they couldn't really tell me to stop. Yeah. And they also knew that in my quiet way, I was more dogged than anybody they could have to confront in my nice diplomatic way. A board member called, it went on and on for a year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah. And then I realized somewhere, and I got promoted. That's another important point I should say. I got promoted to brand president. And that's when
during that time?
Yes.
Oh, wow. Okay. I didn't realize it was that what happened while this was all going down.
Yeah. Early on, it was October 2020, which I think is a testament to the fact that I was performing in the role.
Yeah.
You know, you don't promote someone to brand president, which is next in line for CEO, if you think they're doing a crap job at their job.
Yeah.
But they kept pushing, and they kept, you know, they were very fearful that it was going to cause reputational harm. There was no evidence of that. You know, coming out of COVID, our business was doing great. Our stores open again. Our brand was strong. That was all because of the work that I did with my team. So this sort of fear that it was going to affect the business never manifested. And yet they held that out there as this like, but it could. And then employees started complaining. I don't think it was a lot, you know, but there's this very vocal, punitive minority, and they're afraid of them. And it's like, just tell them, no, she's allowed to. She's a mom. You get to say what you think. She gets to say what she thinks. Now get back to work. Like, why can't a CEO say that? But they were complaining and writing HR and writing my boss, and they all hated it. And then there was a Twitter mob coming after me, and it went on that way for a year and a half longer. And there's a bunch of stuff that happened in between. I mean, I was made to do an apology tour in which I did not apologize.
God. Really?
Yeah. I had to apologize for my racism.
Oh my goodness. And did you, and
to
you
whom?
did it? Exactly. So
Well,
what does that look like?
I did not apologize. I explained myself. I accepted it because I was fighting to keep my job, and I felt I had no choice. But I would not bend a knee. I refused to bend a knee. But I accepted the challenge, I guess you might say. The reason that was prompted is because in March of 21, I went on Fox.
How dare you?
Yeah. You know, my story, I moved my family to Denver so my kids could go to school, and it got some national attention. And Laura Ingraham invited me on, and I accepted. And I knew that it would be controversial, and I didn't care. It was a national platform. I wasn't a viewer. I didn't really know anything. I didn't care. I just want to tell my story. Who cares what she thinks? And, you know, the fact is she was outspoken about this from the beginning. She's been heroic in regards to this issue. And sure, we may disagree on some things, but who cares? Why can't, I'm sure we all disagree on some things. Who cares? Right. So I accepted it. And I stand by everything I said. I would say it again, and I'd say it to her, but that just drove people mad. And because I said it to the wrong person. So that must mean I was racist. Like the enemy, and I racist, and I was anti-LGBTQ and all these things. And so I had to answer for, I was told I had to answer for that. And you'll get a kick out of this. I was sent an email before the apology tour that was suggested, but it was required. Saying these are the questions you should be prepared to answer. Are you with us or against us? Are you on our team? Are you a racist? Are you a conspiracy theorist? Are you anti-vax? Are you anti-science? Oh my God, the list went on. I mean, it was like a struggle session. You know, it was like you have to pledge your loyalty to our team being the left.
Yeah.
Of which I was a part for my entire adult life. But I asked one question that went against the platform, and I was suddenly a QAnon something.
An outcast.
I had to look up what QAnon was. I didn't even know what it was. I'm like, are there really people that think this? Anyway, I did the apology tour, which really was just an explanation of like, here's why I'm doing this. This is a year and a half in already, right? Like by the time I do the apology tour, it's June 21. Schools have been closed for 3 seasons. No sign of opening in the fall. Like I was not backing down, you know? And I just explained why it mattered and, you know, why kids were being harmed, which of course now is accepted that they were, you know, both in terms of learning loss, mental health, isolation, all of it. I got a few questions. I think, you know, one was about why would you choose Laura Ingraham? She's a racist. I said, that's silly. I can talk to people, you know, what I just said here. It's too important. It's a national platform. And, you know, what's so funny is that their point they make is like only terrible, bad, racist people watch the show. I'm like, well, then how did you see it? You saw it?
That's a very great point. It's a wonderful question.
Love it.
And then the other question, this is really, you'll find this comedic, where the other questions were about my husband, because my husband was also very outspoken, but more so he has an aggressive tone in a way that I'm more diplomatic. As a woman in corporate America, you learn that. He didn't have a job. He had no employer to mind. And he's just that way in life. And I am fine with that. And he spoke on subjects I didn't. You know, he was outspoken about not just vaccine mandates, but vaccine effectiveness. And
do you mean on social media or like
on social media?
Okay.
On social media.
And so I had to answer for him, like basically like, do you disavow the things your husband said?
Unbelievable. You had to answer for him. Wow. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah. And I said, it's crazy. I mean, it's completely bonkers.
Yeah, it's
and my
crazy.
answer was simply, I support his right to speech just like I support yours.
Yeah.
And by the way, he doesn't work here. So who cares what he thinks?
Exactly. Who cares what he thinks? I mean, wow, that is unbelievable. Okay, so then.
Yeah, but it's like this cult. You have to
Everything.
distance yourself from everyone that disagrees. And disagreement can be asking a simple question like, are we sure closed schools for 2 years is a good idea? Like that is enough to get you banished, and that makes you a heretic. And then eventually, basically what happened was I was told there was no longer a place for me at the company in January of 22. And rather than accept, because they offered me severance, you know, a significant amount of money, $1 million, but with a non-disclosure agreement. And I was not going to sign an NDA. I wanted to talk about the censorship because it's so dangerous. And in fact, the censorship and the smearing of good people who ask good questions is what keeps others silent.
Right.
And it's what prevented a conversation, a meaningful, balanced, reasoned conversation about kids in schools and all the other stuff. And I think prevented schools from opening sooner. You know,
if they felt so strongly about their position, why would they need you to sign an NDA anyway?
Exactly.
Like if they felt like we can defend this, why would they need you to sign something? That's insane.
Yeah, it is.
Well,
insane.
and the interesting thing now, because I've been, you know, outspoken ever since, and I resigned very publicly with an article on Barry Weiss's Substack, which used to be Common Sense, is now at the Free Press, and it went a little bit viral, and you know they didn't really have a response at first, but by the time they gathered, you know, I was the person that managed their comms before, so I was gone. So who's managing the comms? You know, their response is, well, we were fine with her asking questions and advocating for children about schools, which they weren't. But no one wants to say they supported closed schools now. That's not a position that anyone takes now. What they say is they weren't okay that I was challenging public health officials.
Yeah.
But public health officials kept the schools closed. So it's a nonsensical, ridiculous answer. But they're just trying to find a way to make what they did seem reasonable in a world in which no one thinks it's okay at this point that schools were closed so long.
Even now, there's a lot of other stuff that's being questioned now. And there's a lot of other stuff that people are not coming out and saying, hey, we're really sorry that we screwed that up. We're really sorry that we did that wrong. No one's coming out and saying that.
No, and that's what's infuriating to me is like there's this sort of admission, even in the New York Times, that this learning loss was egregious, that children are suffering, the mental health impacts, etc. But they pretend like it just happened.
Right.
Like it wasn't a decision, a poor policy choice.
Amen.
Because they don't want to blame the people they supported.
Yeah.
And they won't still let folks like me explain why did me, just a normie mom, why did I know it was a bad idea?
Right.
Why was I smeared and called a racist by the New York Times and harassed by writers, so-called journalists from the New York Times for saying a thing that was patently obvious common sense? So there's sort of acknowledgement of the problem, but no accountability to your point. And I don't plan on stopping until there's accountability.
Good for you. Yeah, because it's only going to validate how completely wrong they were. It's just so complete. It's obvious what's happening, and it's good that you're not going to stop. The same people are still in charge and able to make decisions. You know, it's just yesterday, I believe, that New York City lifted a vax mandate for parents to watch their kids play sports in school.
Oh my God.
Oh my God.
This is a city.
Outrageous.
This is a city where that same person, that same unvaxxed adult, could go to a Knicks game at Madison Square Garden. They could not watch their freshman, junior varsity student play basketball with 20 other parents in a gym.
Completely insane.
God.
Yeah. And
so how did the book thing happen? Because you wrote a book about this entire experience. When and how did that happen?
After I resigned, I sort of had in my mind that I would write one. I had written a book in 2008, and so I knew I could. It's really hard to write a book. It's not for everyone. It's not.
Yeah, it's hard.
It's really tough. But I was like, I think I can do it, and I thought I could tell the story in a way that would be interesting. And it's not just a COVID rant, although for some people that's what they like. It really is a memoir about being a woman in corporate America and the sort of takeover of wokism in corporate America. And then, of course, the back half of the book is very much about my struggle internally during these last 2 years of COVID.
Do you have friends on the inside still who supported you along the way, and still no one? No one had your back?
You were there for 20, how long? 23? Is it 20 something?
Just shy of 23 years.
23
not one
years.
person.
Oh,
Jennifer,
my God.
That breaks my heart. That breaks my heart. That's a long time. And that's not okay.
That's the hardest part. Honestly, that's the hardest part.
Yeah, that's the hardest part. That has to be the hardest part.
Do you think that, I mean, because it's so weird. It seems like after the George Floyd thing, so many companies were bullied into making a statement about the whole George Floyd thing, the whole BLM thing. Do you think that if there wasn't, if companies would just say, we're a jeans company, we're not going to have a statement or an official position on this, do you think that would eliminate some of these problems? Or is there any way, as a communications expert, you would know, can companies do that? Can they just stay out of this political game altogether and just focus on the widgets? You know what I mean?
I do. In fact, I write about at length in my book. I say what we need is a return to normie capitalism, where companies focus on making a great product, marketing it in an aspirational way that is still truthful to the extent that the aspiration can be truthful, and stop trying to profit off of these fake values-driven messages in an attempt to capitalize on, the activism of young people, to say like, hey, we're like you, we're aligned with your values. No, you're not. You're a company. Your only value is to make money. And when you take that stance, that's really all that is. It's a lie. And I think that companies need to get back to it, but they're afraid. They're afraid of their younger employees. They're afraid of their own children, and it's not cool anymore to just make a lot of money. You got to be a social justice warrior and disavow your privilege. And so CEOs take these stances so that they can be beloved. It's not enough that they have private plane money. They want the world to love them, and they pretend like they never cared about making money, which is hogwash, because nobody makes tens of millions of dollars on accident. Right. That you make that much money because you try and you care about money. If you wanted to be a social justice warrior, you would have run a nonprofit somewhere, But I think they can, and I think they're going to have to. Because the fact is, one, you're limiting your growth potential. You're not accessing, all of the possible consumers in the market. But I also think at this point, there's too many examples of the lie manifesting, whether it's Sam Bankman-Fried or Elizabeth Holmes or, there's a bunch of others. Those are the high profile ones, but they wrap themselves in this wokeness, and investors bought the lie and were scammed. Yeah. And you know what? The money men aren't going to stand for that much longer. They're not. They lost money. And again, that's their priority. There are scant few examples of those who have stood up to it. And the one I often cite is the CEO of Netflix, who in 2021 was pressured and bullied to take Dave Chappelle's show off the platform. And he said no. He said, we're going to run a lot of content for a lot of people. If you don't like it, don't work here. And guess what?
They made a lot. Right. They're making a lot of money. Exactly. Okay. Yeah. And it's not just the left that's doing this. It's not just leftist companies. It's also conservative run companies. I've seen it. I mean, because we both worked in corporate America. It's not just a leftist problem. It's also a rightist problem, if you will. It's like you say. I think it's interesting that you say that adults are afraid of children. You're absolutely right about that. That's profound. It's like they are. They're afraid of these children. That's crazy. It's
insane.
Nuts.
Who's the grown up in the room? It's insane.
It is.
And they're bullied into it. And, I think in corporate America, you have these CEOs and they're they're not very courageous, and
No.
they sort of have gotten ahead by kind of doing what's expected of them. You think of them as leaders, but for the most part, they're not. They're just
not.
do what's expected. And in these situations, they have like their head of HR and their head of Corp Comm yelling at them that they need to take this seriously and take a stand, and they're not making a decision on their own. It's pathetic, and it's weak.
It is weak. Yep.
I think the thing is, you're right. It is on the right too, but I think, and I say this as a former lefty, I think the vast majority are taking these stances on the left. Like even when you have like a bank pretending to be woke, I mean, come on, a bank.
I hear you.
Like a bank cares about anything? Like Goldman Sachs?
I know. It's like it's like what is it? You're a bank. Yeah, it's like the whole you're taking it's money. Like what is it? What is it?
But doesn't it just make you wonder?
Yeah.
Doesn't it make you just wonder? Like people accept this lie.
I know.
What won't they accept? It's so patently obvious a lie. And Sam Bankman-Fried revealed the lie in an exchange, a DM exchange, where he said, "Oh, it's just something we woke Westerners do so people like us."
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And there it is. And they'll still fall for it.
It'll
eat it up. Continue to happen.
They lap it up.
Yeah, they really do.
I think they just want to believe it. I think they want to believe in something bigger than themselves. And I actually think that I say this as a non-religious person, I think the sort of move away from religion, like we still have a religious impulse as humans. And so we want to believe in something bigger than ourselves and feel part of a group and feel morally superior. And so I think we end up worshiping these false gods, which in some cases are CEOs.
Yeah. Yep.
Absolutely right.
You're definitely onto something there for sure. Uh-huh.
So Jennifer, I know I read recently that, and you just alluded to it, that you're politically homeless at the moment, that you were a registered Democrat for 30 some years, and now you're a registered nothing. And so what is it? Because I know, I'm sure as a 30-year long plus Democrat, there's lots of issues that you take with the GOP. What is it about? What would it take for the GOP to get your vote at this point?
Yeah. Well, I registered as an independent or unaffiliated, which means I would vote for either side. So, I think the idea that you're going to have a political candidate that supports everything you believe in, I think is ridiculous. So like my goal is 50%. Like, do you support the top two things I care about, which right now is freedom and individual liberties and children? Will you do what it takes to protect our individual liberties and to protect children? And if you line up with me on those two things, I will vote for you, and I don't care what party you are.
Okay, fair enough.
So the only reason I didn't register as a Republican is I find on both sides, as you've articulated, Daisy, like they're both so, you have to agree with every point or you're banished and considered a heretic. And I think that's just as true on the right. And so I don't want to be held to, I have to tick every box to be a member of this group. So I'll just be not a group.
I think that's fair. I think that's fair. We hear that from people that are on our side. I mean, I think that we get that because we have a very large community of people that are, kind of like loyalists that we talk to every day, that people are like, well, listen, if you don't believe this way, then, you can't be a conservative. We do hear that from some people.
Oh yeah.
And so, I can kind of understand that. I can kind of understand where that could be frustrating for somebody.
Yeah. And I think Trump illustrated that, right? Like if you were a conservative that didn't support Trump, then you were what do they call it?
A rhino.
Rhino. Yeah.
Right.
It used to be 20 years ago, you could be a pro-life Democrat, you could be a pro-choice Republican. Like you can't anymore.
Right.
You have to, and it's so insane to me.
Right. It also used to be, Jennifer, that liberals and conservatives could sit in a room and talk to one another without killing one another. Remember? Remember that?
Good times.
Good
times.
I know. Good times indeed.
I mean, it was like famous, the stories of, Ruth Bader Ginsburg and Anthony Scalia. They were friends and they went to the opera.
Yeah.
Like, you can't have that anymore.
Yeah.
You can't. It's true. It's a huge, huge shame, actually.
It is.
So, Jennifer, where is the best place that people can follow you, learn more about you? Where would you like to direct our audience?
Well, I hope people check out the book. So you can buy that all the places where books are sold, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or direct from the publisher at levisunbuttoned.com. And I'm on Twitter. Twitter got me ousted from the company, and I persist in being present there, which may be a fool's errand, which is just my name at Twitter, Jennifer Sey. And then I have a Substack called Say Everything.
Yeah, which is great. And also I want to point out that you have a hugely awesome and very interesting sports background, a gymnastics background that people, if you're interested in that, people listening, you should definitely check that out, because you have that whole background that we didn't even tap into. So definitely read the Substack, learn more about Jennifer and that background as well.
And that's what your other book is about, right? Chalked Up?
Yeah, they're both memoirs. Chalked Up is about my time in the sport.
Yeah,
and basically it exposed through a first-hand experience, the abusive culture.
Yeah, because you're kind of a badass, and people should read about that too. So.
Well, thank you so much for being with us. We so appreciate it.